Well, I'll begin with the introductions here. I know people are going to be coming in from the break. Welcome, everybody, to the last session of our meeting today. We have a really excellent panel, and the topic of today's discussion is, as it says in the program here, protecting the European information and media space from AI's potential harms. And I know that this is immediately a provocative title because one of the things that we've talked about throughout the sessions today has been both the positives and the negatives of AI, that this assumption of a pure negativity is one of the problems. I've mentioned this a couple of times in previous panels at our university, at Stockholm University, where we do both research and practical journalism education. It's a constant discussion we have how to frame the use of these technologies. And let's forget about the fact that defining what these technologies are is also very often done wrongly if we use it that way. But discussing what the benefits of our use of AI might be, what AI means, what the positive possibilities are in terms of real journalism, about saving time to engage in real journalism, investigative journalism. So we have three speakers today, and the plan is that I will not be occupying any time in this discussion, and I will invite each speaker to maybe offer some preliminary introductions to themselves, the work that they do, their ideas around this connections to European information space and what can be done about AI. The speakers present themselves, and then after that point, based on what we hear, we have a discussion. First up here, but also including the audience. So I would say during this early session, if we allow the speakers to just present their main ideas, and then once we enter the discussion, I fully hope that we can be engaged with audience members as well. So I'd like to begin by asking Matthias Pfeffer if he's willing to speak. You are the founding director for the Council of European Public Space in Germany. So welcome, Matthias.
Which is working. Okay, thank you very much for inviting me. Yes, I founded this NGO, Council for European Public Space, this year to advocate in Brussels for using AI technologies and other digital technologies to build a public European public sphere, which was never built before because of language barriers, and now we have the opportunity to overcome them. That's the positive aspect of AI in that field, and I think there are few, but we have to start, unfortunately, with the negative ones again. I think it's not really clear enough how critical the situation is that we live in, because, I mean, we can see it in America now when populism and technology align and take over democracy, take over power in state. We allowed companies, big tech companies, for over 20 years to build up these enormous powers of data, of money, economic powers, of knowledge about societies. They know more than the governments do already. And now, therefore, it's very consequent that they take over. So this is a game of power. And the question is of power. Is democracy still in place? This is the separation of power. This is the control of power by justice, independent justice on the one side, and on the other side, independent journalism. But the journalism, we heard a lot of interesting insights today, is really under threat as much as democracy is, at least. And I would say the dynamic is just starting because LLMs are just on the market since exactly 2 years now. It feels like 20 years. And the new stages that they will climb up to in the near future is really frightening. I mean, it's even published by OpenAI, for example. They leaked somewhere their plans for the 5 levels of AI in the next years. The next status is level 3. Now they are on level 2. Level 3 is an agent that is on the level of a high professional university professor acting for you for 1 day, taking over all your tasks and just acting with them. And I think we do not reflect enough what is new on AI, on this generative AI, in comparison to other technologies that we already know and that we already all survive. The new thing is that we build actors. These are actors. They are developing by themselves. And we do indeed create, and I want to come back to one sentence in this morning session, we do create a control problem. It is a control problem. It is huge. And you can read that even from the former vice president of Google, Jeffrey Hinton, which was now the Nobel Prize winner for physics. He is one of the strongest critics, and he's really addressing that he is afraid of even the extinction of humanity, as you all know. Giving someone like him the Nobel Prize sounds strange, because his own creation is threatening humanity. I would say it's not really clear if it threatens humanity, but it already threatens democracy and autonomy of people. And this is because the knowledge that we get through media. The media is more and more ruled by AI. We were used to that. Social media is already the distribution of content, of information is ruled by AI algorithms like Facebook's ones and so on. And now the content, the information itself is created by AI more and more. They take over more and more production of information that is critical for democracies, for societies, for ourselves, for our life. And at the bottom of that, there is a black box. So a black box is operating what we know, what we learn, and how we discuss in society. I think it's a big problem, and I want to come back to the control problem. The control problem is departed into two parts. We do have a technological control problem, which is addressed by people like Geoffrey Hinton and, for example, Stuart Russell. If you are interested in this question, please, I recommend his book, Human Compatible, how we keep control over AI. It's a real, very interesting book. He's one of the so-called popes of AI. And there is another problem, a control problem, that is a political control problem. We are already losing the political control over this power. As I said before, in my view, the problem is the combination of the big tech companies that we do have already, combined with AI, and now combined also with populist parties and anti-democratic powers in society. So saying that, I really hope that one of the roles of journalism in the future will not only be to use these tools, but to make clear that these tools are very dangerous weapons. We need a much broader discussion in society about the dangers, about the downsides of this technology. Every time we have this discussion in politics, in the public, it's always about, we have to link up to this process, otherwise we will be left behind, and so on and so on. It's very neoliberal what is said there, but the development itself, it's out of control. It's absolutely out of control. And it's not clear, the use of this technology is not really clear, and we do not have a regulation, not a binding regulation for that. I would say AI is as much a high-risk technology as atomic energy is. But before atomic energy was used, they had built a very strong international association or regulation for that. They needed in the 50s, like I think only 3 or 4 years to build the International Atomic Authority, which is controlling how it is used and who can use it. And we do not even have such a regulation inside now after, I think, 10 years of discussions about AI on the international level. So the lack of regulation and the lack of knowledge about the dangers of this technology is, in my view, one of the biggest problems that we are facing. But anyway, now coming back to the positive side, to the upsides, I hope I can stay an optimist. And I think we should also talk as much as about the dangers. We should talk as much about the opportunities that we have if we use that technology in a regulated and controlled way for the purpose of democracy, of autonomy of people, of knowledge, and so on. That means that we have to build up in Europe, and to come to the point, Europe is the only island in the world that can do so, in my view. It's not only because Europe had the first regulations in AI Act and other regulations, but also Europe has a tradition. I mean, the idea of democracy was built up here. We are here in a country which was under Russian control for a long period of time. I hope people learn out of that. And now the chance is there that the diversity of Europe can come together to a new let's say, leading power in that field of technology, building up a technology that really serves people and democracies and not undermining it. And I developed a very concrete idea. My background is journalism. I was for 35 years a journalist. And I developed the idea of this public sphere enabled by AI technology for Europe because, as I said, we had the language barrier. We have 27 languages in Europe. The discussion about Europe's unity was always limited, despite to the fact that there was no public sphere. And a public sphere is elementary to a liberal democracy, as we all know. And the basis of this liberal publicity is an informed citizen. So, and now we have the chance to inform people much better than we did before by spreading out trustworthy information over language barriers by automated translation. So I'm advocating in Brussels at the moment for building up own capacities, own European capacities. I mean, it's really astonishing that we don't have an alternative to TikTok and Instagram, for example, or X. And I mean, also this morning it was mentioned about the candidate in Romania. I mean, these things pop up everywhere since years. We had that candidate for the AfD in Germany for the Euro Parliament. His colleague was a spy for China in the European Parliament working there. He was arrested, but he went on with his campaigning. Everything was done on TikTok. He was traveling several times to China. Nobody knew what he was doing there, but he was leading 80% of the political posts in Germany was by this man. And this was not only because his stupidity fitted very good to the stupidity of these algorithms, which only reward like emotions and stupidity, you know, but also that these algorithms are controlled. We must really have a clear view on that by the Communistic Party of China at the end. And this, the result of the European election in Germany, by the way, were that 4 years before, the young people were voting like 50% for the Green Party because they were afraid of environment and so on. And now they had like 60, 70% for the AfD, for the right wings. So, because he was ruling TikTok, and TikTok is the new reality for special kind of segments of voters. So coming back to that, again, I say we need an alternative to TikTok and to Instagram and X. It's not, we cannot accept that the public sphere is ruled by companies who do not align to our laws, to our fundamental laws and fundamental rights. And therefore, we have to build up own capacities after the last legislation period of the European Commission, which was more in regulating. So build up an own infrastructure for trustworthy news and information, allow people to get the news from all over Europe in their language. And that would be one cornerstone for a new public sphere that could be a European one.
Thank you very much. Moving to Vincent Berthier. Welcome. You saw you earlier today, but you're back again.
Hello again. Well, I'm still in charge of the RSF Tech and Journalism.
Yes,
desk.
you are. You are still in charge.
Yeah, there is no laid off between. And so, well, thank you. I think it's a good idea that we could have this conversation because most of the time when we talk about Gen AI, these last 2 years, we are talking with an innovation perspective and something very positive. And it's okay because we are, as journalists or media professionals, we are looking for a new way to produce information, to reach to our audience and to earn trust again. But somehow, as you raised, there is big issues with AI systems, not only big language models with platforms, with TikTok, with X recently. And what you underline is a question of sovereignty of our technology. And of course, we have a big problem in Europe because, well, Europe is the continent who basically created most of technology used to build the web. And Europe is not a digital power. And this is a kind of a trauma in the European policymakers. And there is a kind of dilemma, which is stupid in my opinion, between innovation and regulation. First, because innovation is a social process. And so that means that regulation is part of innovation. And second, it's not because you want to create something new that new is a value in itself. And if something new, you raise the case of atomic bomb, is able to destroy the world, maybe it should be forbidden or very well regulate. I think that maybe one of our problem, and I talked a little bit about this earlier, is that we are actually regulating. And regulating is something very specific in a philosophy of law, which is when you adapt something external to the actual legal framework. But maybe we should start to consider what kind of tech do we want instead of what kind of tech we don't want. Because we will always running after the cars and we will never catch them. And I think that hopefully Elon Musk raised this awareness because Twitter was not a perfect platform, but it used to be the favorite platform of Western journalists. And now it has turned into something that somehow we can consider as a political interference platform. And actually, and right now we don't have any legal tool to prevent Elon Musk to do whatever he wants with his platform and to interfere with. I think 2 weeks ago he was trying to interfere with some decision of justice in Italy, and he can do whatever he wants. And there is no law, even in Europe, to prevent that from him. And we need to be more ambitious. And the problem is that do we still have the political power to be more ambitious? Because the European Commission, it's not because I'm French, but what happened with Thierry Breton can be seen as a signal of alarm. He was a former commissioner of the internal market, and he embodied the regulation. He embodied the DSA. He want to public fight with Elon Musk on X, and he has not been renewed as a commissioner. And my impression as someone working every day on this topic is that it sent a signal to platforms and big tech representatives that they were in position of force, and they were able to not only lobby within the writing of law, but also to impeach somehow the law to be applied. I take an example. 1 month or 2 months ago, we had a strange open letter seen by Meta, by Yann Lequin, the boss of AI at Meta, basically explaining the classical dilemma to Europe is that Europe should be less coercive on this regulation if Europe don't want to miss the AI revolution. The interesting thing is that they are not even talking about AI Act. They are talking about GDPR. GDPR is really the pain in the ass of big tech. And today they feel confident that they are allowed to contest even the laws that have been voted years ago. And this is my main concern, because when we are talking about AI, the arms of AI, I don't like to humanize technology. It doesn't make sense. But actually, we are talking about two things: that emerging uses of AI and AI industry. And AI industry is almighty. Because we are talking about big tech. OpenAI does whatever they want right now. They are making partnerships with some media to convince people that they are trustworthy and responsible, but they just build their assets on spoiling medias and spoiling copyrights. And today, everyone, including France, everyone in Europe wants to build their own national champion. And because, of course, it's Europe, we are 27. And we don't act as one, we act as 27. And everyone wants a European champion, but everyone wants this European champion to come from his country. And France is doing something like that. We will see at the coming AI summit in Paris if regulation and trustworthy AI will be at the agenda. Germany, I think, had also an AI champion. And we have actually a lot of great data scientists in Europe. So basically, a lot of European countries could have a champion. But what we need a truly European champion, not a French champion for Europe, not a German champion for Europe, not an Italian, blah, blah, blah. And this is what we need. We need also regulation and investment, because Europe is a market. And so you need both if you want to build something strong. And my fear is that we will have no regulation and no investment.
Thank you. And we will finish here with Adriana Dinar, who is the projects director at the Prague Center for Media Skills. And welcome.
Thank you very much. I will. I did ask to be the last because I was sure that I would have a lot of points to react, and I will do that. But before that, let me just briefly explain my approach to media and to this problem or topic of AI, digitalization, technology. We do focus on that more from the perspective of human rights and social impact. I'm co-founding member of a committee for human rights and modern technologies, which is under the Council of Human Rights, which is a kind of advisory body to the government in the Czech Republic. And it has quite I think quite a funny history, because it was founded in 2019. And when we started to talk about, really, we should start to talk about technology in this council, everybody was like, you have to like demonstrate that really it's a topic. And now today there are different committees, all focused on elderly and the rights of foreigners and kids and basic rights, etc. And everybody's saying, we have problems with this, and we have problems with accessibility for people with different special needs, and we have problems with this. So it really proved that now technology and AI and digitalization are the kind of key topics in all the committees that are in that council. So let me just link to what Vincent said about regulation. We started to address the topic from a different level, because the regulation can be on this kind of European, international, national, and also on the level of media, and also on the level of journalists. And we started to ask, what do really journalists know about technology? What do they know about algorithms? How does it affect their lives, their professional performance? What do they know about the algorithms in newsrooms? I mean, who buys them? What are the risks? What do even the people who are IT and the marketing directors or sales directors know about that? And what we found, it was quite interesting. It was quite a big survey 2 years ago, 2022. So it was when the LLMs were just starting to be more spread among the public. And what we found is that there are 3 levels. First was when and it was quite a sample of about 700 journalists from private and public media in the Czech Republic. And not just journalists, but also we had some IT and sales guys. What we saw, that when you are speaking about technology on their level, they have some knowledge about cybersecurity, and they have some trainings in AI, but in the sense of maybe a tool, it's beginning to be more about the harms or about the risks, about the potential. But in those times, it was quite limited. They didn't have any much idea about, for example, this kind of self-management, digital self-management. I'm talking about even hygiene, legal aspects, and all these kind of things when we are talking, for example, about female journalists and the threats to online, and all the kind of pressures they receive. We then saw that when you were asking about algorithms and media and the newsrooms, people had very low idea. Including the people who were buying the technology. So the awareness about responsibility and accountability on what are you buying, and we started to speak. Can you realize something about non-discrimination? about the right to information, how accessible is your media, yes, to people who might have some different needs, etc. We found that the situation there is quite worrisome. And even if you were asking about privacy, you said GDPR. I mean, what kind of data does your media gather? What do you do with that? Who's responsible for that? Even the journalists didn't know. I mean, the journalists didn't know, but even the guys, I mean, from sales were not really. So what we started to do is maybe to advocate also on a kind of increased education and upskilling of journalists in that, like understanding really technology and its risks. From that level, I mean, the personal one, going via newsrooms to the public and to the societal impact of technology, because it really, I think, also shapes the discourse we have about technology. And here I totally, I think, agree with both that I think I mean, the new things doesn't mean automatically that's good, yes. And we have a kind of fight here in the Czech Republic, trying to make the for example, digital information agency we have understand that digitalization doesn't mean automatically progress, that it's good if it helps to fulfill human rights, if it makes you more happy, if it increases your well-being. In that sense, it's really a good tool. But if it doesn't do so, if it increases discrimination, digital exclusion, etc., it's not a good tool and it shouldn't be used. So we are talking, for example, more and more also about the right to non-digital communication. And I think this is another level of regulation we will have to talk more and more in the future, which is this kind of like self-regulation, digital hygiene, and really like leaving that space. We have to learn to leave that space and put it on in the shelf that should correspond. And I always use the example of alcohol. I think we do have several bottles at home of wine and whiskey, etc., but we don't drink it at once. We have already mechanisms to regulate it. We know that sometimes it's good, but you have to know the measure. I was wondering, how did we learn that? You don't have a course, you don't have a training at the university. How do you know that you shouldn't drink like your 15 bottles at once? So I think we can't rely just on states and international organizations to regulate. We should really steer the public discussion on more digital hygiene and some kind of limitations, self-limitations to that, because we have given that also a lot of power. I'm also very much in contact with public institutions, and we work on topics, obviously, on disinformation and information disorders. And public institutions are always here in the Czech Republic complaining, I know Meta and X, they really ignore us because, we are a small language and they have one person for 5 states, and you complain and they do nothing. And it's like, okay, I mean, and even with I mean, not only like social media platforms, but also with Google and with Microsoft, etc. Yes. So it was like, hey guys, I mean, you let them in your house. You are, I mean, for example, when we are talking about tech platforms, also you are allowing them to run your systems and your clouds. So, and they are like official public tenders for that. So it's about you to put a clausula that we want a content moderator 24/7 to be at our disposal. Because if you count, for example, the public spending on big tech, it's quite big everywhere. You need them, even if you are the office of the government. So you can, in a certain way, dictate some conditions, especially in the public tenders. But I think I have diverted from. Coming back to some of the points I wanted to also to highlight. And Matthias has said a lot of things. I had a comment on TikTok today, which was, we had, well, there's a sphere, and I think in your countries as well, but probably more research than here, which is the topic of information consumption, media consumption, and disinformation in minorities. And when I talk about minorities, I think about Roma people, for example. I think about people who are sign language users, yeah? Because in the Czech Republic, I don't know how your countries are, in the Czech Republic, we have just one serious, serious in terms of like quality journalism, media program for people who are users of sign language per day. So imagine yourself that you would have just 40 minutes, and it's very quick, so it's quite heavy. And you don't know what they are consuming more. Who is the one producing it? There's zero media literacy trainings. There is zero control or overview who are the media producers, content producers, information producers, etc. And I have just been today on an online conference with Roma people on this information, and it was the one of the many interesting points. One of them was the Roma people in Bulgaria are on TikTok mostly, and not only young people. So I was thinking, being Russia, or China or another, you have an easy job. And you have an easy job because, and this is one of my purposes here in for example, with the organization, is to try to research more what's happening with this information, disinformation, media consumption, and how can we somehow enter the space also via like tech and for example, like more raising awareness about the risks and the opportunities technology and AI have.
Thank you. It's very interesting that you mentioned alcohol, actually, because I live in a country where the state controls the sale of alcohol. Anything over 5% is sold in a state monopoly store. It opens at 10 o'clock in the morning and it closes at 6. It's open from 10 to 3 on Saturday and it's closed on Sunday. And that's the only store you can buy alcohol in. And the reason was the Swedes were drinking so much after, that they were lowering the GDP of the country. Actually, a while they were drinking the economy. And so the Swedish state, in connection with this sort of what we call abolition, they decided that they were going to do this. So it's a very interesting case study, actually. You mentioned alcohol, and if we're talking about the role of the state, there you have a very clear example of social engineering on the part of the Swedish government, which actually did lower alcohol consumption. And actually, I'm glad you said it, because it leads me to my first question here, which is regulation is a common theme that's running across this platform. And I wanted to ask a slightly provocative question, because earlier on today, we had some of my fellow Americans look to Europe and begged you, do something because we can't do anything in our home country. And I'm wondering if that's a naive position. I'm wondering are we perhaps romanticizing European political will in the face of corporate power? We're seeing, declining financing for public service broadcasting, many of the things that we took for granted in the 1980s and began to dissolve under Reagan and Thatcher. We're seeing those slowly erode. And I'm just wondering if regulation is the solution. What's your position regarding political will in the face of money and power in a way that I think is quite different from maybe the Europe that we thought about 20 or 30 years ago in the face of technology, for example?
Well, when you hope for someone else to do what you want to do, it's always a naive position. When we talk about AI in industry, we should have a conversation about AI narratives. Because what is going on right now is that we have these big models. The AI is wider than big models, but now big models, ChatGPT is AI. And AI is a synonym to revolution, industrial revolution. We still don't know exactly how we can use it, but everybody knows that it is a revolution. And no one wants to miss that revolution. Europe has a kind of a trauma because of its past, and Europe wants to be a digital power not at every cost. Hopefully, AI Act is still forbidden some bad uses, but I won't be too optimistic when you have AI. This is not a topic isolated. Like Europe is in crisis. Political crisis, but also economical crisis. We are obsessed by USA. We are obsessed by our GDP versus USA's GDP. And what we want is just to get richer, like anyone else on the planet. It's legitimate. And so I'm not sure that we can hope a lot from this perspective, because this is a revolution, you need to handle it. But we are still European, and we have a memory. We have a memory of what happened when everyone is just fighting for himself. This is the purpose of Europe. And we can blame Europe because Europe would be only a market, but it is at least a market. And this is something that we have in common. And this is what we are talking about. This is how we can empower every European countries, every European civil societies, and not only policymakers, but also civil societies. We are talking about small languages. This is really important for civil society to settle in other countries that just France, Germany, and so on. It's really important to gather all the cultures of Europe, which is because there is a diversity, which is something very rich we could benefit on. But it's time, I think, maybe it's a little of wishful thinking, but it's time to gather all European cultures and to find a new model within the current situation that could benefit both to investment, because economy is not bad in itself, but also to reasonable use of innovation and being a model. Well, we are Europe is a kind of model worldwide. Like I was talking about Brazil earlier, and Brazil regulation is inspired by DSA, and I think that's a good point. But we need to do more, and not. And if I have to speak to American, I think that American civil society should empower too, using this European, but also from other countries model. And then together we can build something which is bigger than just national interests.
Yeah, that wasn't a comment on my fellow Americans who made that comment, because when I was a PhD student, I did my doctoral dissertation about public broadcasting in Europe, and I was out one night in Finland drinking. Speaking of drinking, and this Finnish person walked up to me and says, "You know what I don't like about Americans?" And I was like, "Okay, here." He said, like, "You all come over here and fall in love with social democracy." Right? And what he was saying was there's a sort of romanticism about Europe versus the United States that Americans tend to fall for. Matthias, you were talking about regulation as a solution. Have we fallen in love with social democracy, or are we right to do that, or is there a problem? That's the same sort of question I'm asking.
Yeah, and in Germany, the law is just breaking apart with social democracy just these days. But anyway, I think we have. I would agree what Vincent said, that regulation should not be, in this narrative only be taken as a break to something which is, much faster and better. This whole Silicon Valley narrative of tech solutionism is completely wrong. And we should really more address this. It is a silly valley narrative that we are following and repeating all the time in our economic discourse. And I really think we do have bigger problems than this. And coming to making people rich, I mean, this technology makes only a few people rich, let's say like 5 or 10, but very rich. And others and societies in terms of ecological footprints and other burdens that they have, and they have to pay for that afterwards. So I would say regulation is one way, and one good story to speak about regulation is that it could be innovative, and that's a new kind of regulation. Also, policy making came to that point. Even, for example, the AI Act, they discovered something new, which is a little new thing in there, and they said, okay, we looked always behind, saying that a law will only apply if something went wrong, definitely. But now we have to look forward and to make ex ante laws, which also include the perspective of new technologies which are not there. They try to do so, but when the AI Act was already ready, the LLMs appeared, and they saw, oh, we did not see that, and they tried to fix that problem in the last minute. But I would say work on this path. That's the real path. We have to do precautionary actions to this kind of technology, which is very, 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 very speedy. And I like your idea very much, Adriana, about media literacy for journalism, for journalists. I think it's crazy, because they are the media, and we have to teach them how the media in the future will look like, and how these tools are working, and what they do to their profession, to fact finding, to truth telling, and to all these things. But it's really very necessary. But we also should tell them report more on this invisible problem that we all have. If it comes to policy is driven in democracies, and that's a bad thing of a democracy, only by survey of the people. What are the people's problems? Migration, and then comes economy and working and getting richer. And on place 18 or 19th, you find digitalization. And that's invisible. Nobody sees it, nobody knows it, but everybody uses it and finds it quite okay. It's not a real problem. And we really should address that this is a general proposed technology that affects all parts of life. And economy and ecological transformation will not succeed if these problems are not solved, because there are monopolies arising because of the informational power, of the concentration of power that I mentioned before. And therefore, I think we should really talk more to society and to politicals as journalists about these problems. And we should also ask for more teaching about what these tools are doing and how we can prevent them to be turned into weapons.
Thanks. I don't know if I could just sort of finish with your view on my question, which was, we hear a lot from Western Europe and the United States. We hear relatively little in Sweden and Britain and the US about what's happening in this part of Europe. What's your view on the political will in this part of the world in terms of regulation? Because I think we know what the discussion is in the US and the UK, maybe in Sweden, but what is it like here?
Yeah. Let me share just one very specific discussion we had, because here in the Czech Republic we have a new proposal on the law of public media services. And there was an attempt, and there is a big discussion about fees, which is absolutely absurd. I mean, you should pay a fee that is like 2 coffees instead of 1.5 coffee, and it's being used by politically and by disinformators as well to make a big fuss about that. But what I wanted to address is there was a proposal to put a clausula on disinformation, that public media should do fact checking and tackle disinformation. There was a big discussion first. Which definition of disinformation do you use? Who's the one who defines disinformation? Because you see the nice attempts in Russia, they have also laws against disinformation, but we would probably not agree with them. And when you say this part of Europe, I would like to remind that Hungary is also this part of Europe. So there was a very interesting discussion saying, okay, but just everything you say about the state, about the regulation, change the state for another model that is not the current one. Yeah. And would you like to have that level of intervention of the state, or to have that? I mean, you have to have a really smart regulation. Yes, and be very careful, because there's a part you want to regulate, and there's a part you really don't want to regulate, because if tomorrow the things change here, and we are quite from the Czech Republic, we are quite with a lot of worries, seeing what's happening in Slovakia in terms of the media landscape. Yes, so you have to, like, I mean, how can I prevent it without really giving like the legal tools to some different, like, not democratic really regimes to limit. That's one thing. Another, which I wanted just also to address, is this ex ante laws. I would also warn about that. It's a very difficult. I mean, I do understand, because I mean the regulation processes are so slow that, I mean, technology is here and you are regulating what was like 5 years ago. But on the other hand, I mean, regulating ex ante is like regulating the usage of teleport. This is, I mean, if it's in English also teleport, we call it in Czech, is kind of like a teletransportation thing that now, I mean, it's science fiction. So regulating some science fiction when you don't know what is it, how does it function, etc. And I can share also, I'm sorry, I'm so practical. I can share a quite astonishing example, which is also about technology, and this is about AI. And the aliens law, new also proposal of the aliens law in the Czech Republic, there was a proposal saying, human translators in migration and asylum processes can be switched for a non-defined technical device. And it was like, and we had quite a big discussion with people who produce technology, with lawyers about that, with translators about that. And if you imagine a person from a Kurdish dialect in an asylum process with a AI system, for example, that has no data sets to be trained on, and your, I would say, I have criticized someone too much. Okay. I was talking about the Czech, I think AI, but this time it's probably linked to the Ministry of Interior. I mean, what I wanted to say is that from the technical point of view and from the legal point of view, it was an absolute nonsense. Yeah. And they were like saying, no, you want to stop technology. I mean, the progress. I mean, you are, and it was, no. I mean, this is really threatening the right to non-discrimination, the right to freedom of expression. I mean, there were a lot of rights threatened, and you were, I mean, we do understand this kind of attempt, but it could be very, very dangerous. Yes. So I don't have the clue. And the last thing I wanted is to yes, well, no, I leave it here because you have a lot of, yes, richer. I have this rich money. 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 Also an example, obviously, I mean, yes, we want to get richer. I mean, the tech platforms want to get richer. I think it's quite I mean, there are businesses that are not Mother Teresa. The trouble is when you hear that I want to get richer, or the question, the main point is money, when you hear public services saying that. And a week ago, 10 days ago, we had this kind of conference from the digital agency in the Czech Republic, which is in charge of digitalization, with a lot of agents in different ministries in charge of digitalization. And the astonishing thing was that the discourse was, it's all about money, it's all about efficiency, and we should model, I mean, we should follow the examples of private sector, banking sector. Look how digitalization works. And it's like, well, you are a public service. They didn't mention citizen or person even once. So I think it's even more scary when this kind of like money-centered vision is adopted by public services, and this is something that I would link also to democracy, and that's the role, I mean, of our organization also to all the time saying, well, it should be human-centered digitalization. I mean, where's the person? So I'm sorry, just about the point to get richer.
We have 20 minutes left, and I don't want to take too much. I would like to open the floor. I know, Graham, you had a question to begin with, and if you have questions, please, if there's anybody else who would like to jump in, please raise your hand, and we can have an order. Otherwise, okay, Graham, why don't you begin then?
Well, now I have 30 questions, but I will avoid them. First, I would choose naivete over cynicism at this point.
Graham.
No, just the reality of this moment. Again, naivete is something we have to talk about a little bit here too, because technology and unintended consequences, you know, those of us who've been in these careers for a while, we've, you know, it used to be every 2 years there was something that would make all the difference. And we have positive changes, and then we have unintended consequences. So we have to look at what is the underpinning. But I want to shift back again to sort of the solutions-oriented approach, because, you know, part of the reason the plea for people in the U.S. looking to Europe is, from my time in Bulgaria, which looks hopeless, I feel more hope in Bulgaria than I do in the U.S. And part of it is there are still mechanisms in place for change, and regulation is not a panacea. And yet, at the same time, because of the Citizens United decision in the U.S., we have two religions in the U.S: efficiency and free markets, and the free markets are not free, right? So we're forced to look who are the helpers, who still has mechanisms in place. And Matthias, I'm really grateful for you introducing the concept of the space. Right? To what we need to do in some ways is figure out how to create the spaces in which we can work together, and which we can value empathy and curiosity, not naivete, but openness. And so I wonder if you could speak more to this idea of how we can create spaces, which you may not be the spaces like the commons that went away in the mid 19th century, and we saw the problems with that, but maybe a virtual space. But for the way we live now, that virtual space is really an actual space. So I wonder if you can say more about how you're trying to, what you envision and how you're trying to set this up.
Yeah, I think we should really, address it as a public space, a public sphere. In that sense, that it was for democracy when it was raised. So the coffee houses and the theaters were the rooms where people met, and when they started discussing about society, and then they said, not everything what the king is doing is right. So we have own ideas. Let's formulate them. Let's find together, build parties, and so on. And I think we should enable this civilization process, so to say, also for the cyberspace. And the cyberspace, I think one of the biggest mistakes was the manifest of the cyberspace by John Perry Barlow, the famous text of The Grateful Dead, a deadhead texting one of the most influential papers on the internet policy in the mid-90s. And he distributed that, I think, at the World Economic Forum in Davos, saying that, like a lyric of Grateful Dead, it was written. It's really great.
This is for people to have a resource. This is the Electronic Frontier Fund.
Yeah, he was the founder later on of that.
Yeah.
But this paper is really influential. You can find it very easily on the web. It's about policymakers, stay away from this cyberspace. It's not your sphere. Here are the free people. We connect together in this free space. Every modem links to another modem. This is the new spirit of the world. This is, stay out with your regulation, with your laws. It's not made for you. Manage your old iron down on earth, but we will go up. Beamed by a lot of LSD, by the way, and other things. And this did not work out. I mean, it was very influential because this was the origin of the platform privilege, which caused most problems. That the platforms like Facebook later on said, we are not responsible for the content that we distribute. I mean, imagine that. I was a journalist, an editor-in-chief for 30 years, and every time when my colleague would have done some harm to someone, I could go to jail. So that's responsibility of journalism. And they say, no, we are just like a telephone company. We are not responsible for what people in their free speech, and they're the ideology of the free speech origin also, what they are communicating. I mean, we are just service providers. And what they did is now, I mean, they changed it. And Google, for example, said later on, even 15 years ago, they made the claim Google wants to be the most reliable news source of the world without having one journalist, without any journalist, but the most reliable news source. What I want to say is no responsibility for the content, just making the money and taking the money out of the market of the serious press, which they did. Now, 80% of the online marketing advertising goes to two companies worldwide. It's Meta and Google. That's not acceptable. That's not acceptable for free markets, but it's not acceptable for free democracies. And they don't take care to align to laws. I mean, that's also not acceptable. So we have to rebuild that cyberspace, which was inaugurated in a wrong way of freedom, of liberty, which is now still the basis of the libertarians that you have over there, like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk. They also think that they are very free because they have more money than the others. And, this understanding of freedom of opinion and freedom of speech and no limits and, developments to the mass and everything is completely wrong and dangerous. And we have to address this. So reclaim the public sphere means reclaim the cyberspace now in our days and, make it a public sphere. It is a process of civilization. I mean, everything we have here that we are proud of, especially in Europe with our culture, it was really a result of hard fights and of a very painful process on a lot of wars and anything else. And then we learned how to live together. And we have to learn how to live together in the cyberspace now, and we have to make rules for that. And the biggest problem, in my view, is that two speeds that we have there. We are very slow animals, still with the same brain than 100,000 years ago. And this is a very fast technology. And we cannot, this is because I like the idea of the ex-ante regulation, not because I think we can forecast the whole future, but I think we have to build up more imagination, what can happen, to take over responsibilities and to clear ourselves that this is our public sphere of the future, and that if we want to live in a good society, we need a good public sphere, and therefore we have to, as I said, reclaim it and build up some rules there.
Vincent, Adriana, and how would you build this space? Or what are some design elements you suggest?
I just one sentence because I have heard the discussion like a week ago and really think where is a kind of digital public space in Europe for us? And there was a wise man saying yes, but just watch out that it stays an agora where you discuss and listen to each other and not becomes a colosseum when there's like a kind of a bus and nobody hears anything. So it was just my point. I will let Vincent and then I maybe retake it back.
Well, this is easy. We are today confronted to a false dilemma. You have two status when you are an online actor: you are a hoster or an editor. Today, platforms are considered as a hoster and service provider, and they should be neutral. This is none of our business. On the other end, I think it's common in very Western law. You are an editor, meaning that you are responsible for everything that you've published, like a journalist, for example. I think in US it's Section 230 of Telecommunication Decency Act, and it's like 3 lines that destroy the whole world because platforms are not responsible. And the problem is that if they are responsible for everything which is published on their services, it's just the biggest censorship machine ever built. So we need to find a new status where they are not allowed to decide what is true and what is not true, but they are responsible for the harm they are doing. We have at RSF some solutions. Well, we suggest we created a ISO-like standard named Journalism Trust Initiative, which allows to certify if a media is following journalistic principles. So it's not about checking if the content is true or not, because this is the beginning of the end when you start to do that, but it's checking if the way you've produced this content is compatible with ethical journalistic standards. And we call platforms and big tech to promote this kind of content produced by this kind of producer, if you prefer, when a user, a citizen, is looking for accurate information. GTI, we call that GTI, is implemented on the Code of Practice on Disinformation on European law, is seated on the European Media Freedom Act. And so we are working on this. This is our main lead. We are pushing hard. Okay. But we also need to build new conceptual tools. Okay, we talked about narratives earlier, and I think this is really important. We need to. I like the ex-ante law because actually AI act as a part of ex-ante regulation because they are strictly forbidden subliminal AI system, which is something which does not exist. So even if one day you are able to create an AI system which is able to manipulate your mind, it won't be allowed in Europe. But at my knowledges, and I think I'm doing a lot of things on AI, there is no consensus about whether this tech exists or not. So I think this is interesting. Of course, we won't be able to, if there is no need in forbidding, for example, time portal or teleportation. But this kind of tool, if we just gather everyone and say, okay, just to be sure, what don't we want? and make a list of what we don't want, maybe we should try to forbid that.
Thank you for the interesting discussion about the Journalism Trust Initiative. I wanted to ask, because I was following this, we as a media are very interested in that, and also the idea was that the algorithm will basically advance media that are upholding the standards. But there are other trends that are bothering me, and that is like speaking about Americans and Elon Musk. He said, "You are the media now, so everyone is media now." And the latest Reuters report on digital media said that people don't care anymore from their information is coming, as long as they feel informed. So what is the media? I mean, like, who's going to decide if you're talking about Journalism Trust Initiative as a one solution for what we have on the social media now? Is it really a solution now when we have influencers that are more bigger influencers than media, or when everybody can say I'm a media now? So this is just the question, like, what's your stand on that when we talk about the regulation?
Yeah, maybe I can give a short answer. There was a question this morning, will AI replace journalists? I would say, yes, it does already. That's actually the fact. For example, in Germany, 1/3 of the journalists are not longer registered in comparison to 10 years ago, I think, this period of time. So we are losing journalists and media outlets, like 100 newspapers a year are dying in the US and so on. Then you can say they will have new outlets, but that does not fill this lag, which is there. There are two answers to this. First answer is everyone is a producer actually and a reader at the same time, and therefore we need a kind of editorial society. We need people who have the skills, we need to educate and so on. That's the idea of the media literacy. But on the other side, we need to make sure that information, because it is part of a critical infrastructure for democracy, it's like clean water. The state must take care that the infrastructure is there, that everyone has access, which, by the way, is a fundamental right here in Europe, to trustworthy information sources. And therefore, we need to build up infrastructures that allow new forms of journalism and that allow new forms of business models, and also public service at its best. We have public service media in Europe. European citizens spend 27 billion euros a year for public service media. That's a lot of money that could be used very well to make a transformation in this new cyberspace, in this new public digital sphere. And so I think we can do both, and that would be both make maybe society at the end better. And it should be driven by the clear idea that what you said, first, what do we want? And then we make it, not the other way around. And therefore, I would say we should ask for a kind of an AI Airbus project in Europe.
Before you answer here, I just want to say that, the argument about public broadcasting get involved, for example, in platforms. Sweden's a very good example of that. We just have a new financing that's going through that's going to take effect in 2026 for public broadcasting. And the new government, which is a right-wing government, has very clearly delineated that they are not allowed to get into that technology because it's seen as infringing on private actors. And so it completely undermines the purpose of public broadcasting, because this is an entire audience that they're never going to reach now otherwise. But that's what I meant earlier about my question about the willingness of politicians to resist the lobbying power of large corporations involved in tech, for example. But Vincent, I think you were going to answer the question. Get that one?
Yes, I know. I just wanted. I mean, your question. When you asked that, I recall some data I have seen recently about the media consumptions, not media consumption, but information consumption of young people, and it's. I mean, where do they get information from? And you see that it's not media anymore. I mean, social media channels, they don't even like discern what's information, what's entertainment. It's this kind of continuous feed of infotainment. And I mean, how do you moderate, regulate? How do you check the quality of that? And how are you going to make young people consume it something differently? Yes, and I think that's one level. And even worse, and I think it's also somehow hinted in the Reuters digital report, is that people are losing interest in news generally, not only, I mean, online, offline generally. And when you see, and I bring it to absolute extreme, which is when Euro Commissioner Jourova was saying, no, we have to have our European agency that would broadcast to Russia because people need to know. Well, if you have a VPN now in Russia, you can get to any these kind of like exile Russian channels. I mean, but you have to want to have the motivation. You have to have the will. And the what we are discovering now is that there is lack of will. I mean, the motivation is decreasing. It's not that you can't. It's not that you don't have the channels. It's not that it's you don't want. Yes, and that's I would say a level we will have to fight somehow. For the moment, I don't know how. For the next conference, it's an idea.
Maybe a few words about you as a media know of Elon Musk, because I spent my last 2 years writing stuff about Elon Musk. And when Elon tweeted that, everyone at LSF was like, "Well, what did you see that?" And I was like, "Yep, it's logical. Like it's Elon Musk, and this is actually an old Silicon Valley ideology to overpass classical and legacy institution and legacy. That's why he is like blaming legacy media all the time, because everything that is before the tech utopia you talked about earlier has to be destroyed. When he wanted to buy Twitter, he met the team, and I think it's New York Post who released the transcription of the meeting, and he explained that he loved Twitter because when you want to do your communication, you have to write a press release, send it to journalists, and then cross your fingers, hoping the journalist will rely on you and not asking too much question and just copy and paste your document. And now that with Twitter, you don't need journalists anymore. So this is part of a kind of a project, I would say. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but it's kind of a project to bypass journalists, to bypass classical institutions. But this is a project of one man. This is a project. Okay, he's the richest man in the world, so it's not exactly just one man, but he's a powerful man. But we should be able to show that we do have other projects for the society, and that's why we are fighting every day. And actually, the lack of will is clearly an issue, because people are astonished by news. People are depressed by news. I am personally depressed by news also, because I'm working with colleagues in Lebanon, in Palestine, in Russia. And even in Russia, for example, even if you want to use a VPN, now it's harder and harder to do so, because it's forbidden. Because if you are catched by the police with a VPN on your mobile, you can go to jail. So we we did something kind of silly. We launched a satellite last year with forbidden Russian channels in order to broadcast in Russia. So there is always this kind of initiatives that we can do. But of course, we are facing not only a technical problem, but an ideological attack towards open society.
Thank you. Well, it's exactly 6:30, and I'd like to thank the panel, which I think was a very interesting discussion. We could obviously keep talking about this for another couple of hours, but there is wine next door. So I'd like to thank everybody for taking part. I know this is the last session of the day. It's been a very long day. It's been a very excellently organized conference. I would say we're on the committee, Graham and I'd like to thank the organizers. We'll do so more in the drink session, but I'd just like maybe we can have a round of applause for the panel for a really excellent discussion. And we will see you next door in 5 minutes, right? All right, exactly. Thanks very much.